Hi, this is Habiba. In this session, we are going to discuss the sampling techniques for conducting your research. What is population versus sample? Population is the total number of individuals under consideration. It is the entire group that you want to draw conclusion about. The population can be defined in terms of geographical location, age, income, and many other characteristics. Character of the population is called a parameter, while the sample is the specific group of individuals that you will collect data from. Suppose if you have population of 10 or 12 people, you are not going to select all for conducting your research. Otherwise it would be too costly. So you need to collect sample out of that population. The single individual in the sample is called as subject, while the single individual of the population is called as element. Sampling methods. Type of the sampling methods. Probability sampling. Probability sampling involves random selection. It allows you to make a statistical inference about the whole group. In probability sampling, each subject of the sample has known probability of getting selected. Each individual from the population have equal chance or probability of getting selected. For example, the probability of getting selected of first individual out of the population is 1 out of 100 and of second individual is 1 out of 99. Probability sampling is always generalizable. Sampling frame. Sampling frame is the actual list of individuals from which sample will be selected. Entire target population is included in it. Suppose your research is encompassing efficiency of 8th graders in some school. So your population is 50 students in that grade. Your population frame is the school database which lists the names and performance of all those students. Sample size. The number of the individuals in your sample depend on the size of the population and on how precisely you want the results to represent the population as a whole. You can use a sample size calculator to determine how big your sample should be. In general, the larger the sample size, the more accurately and confidently you can make inferences about the whole population. Non-probability sampling. This involves non-random selection based on convenience or other criteria, allowing you to easily collect initial data. In non-probability sampling, the probability or chance of getting selection of the individual is unknown. Non-probability sampling is not generalizable. It could only be generalized to the selected population. Types of probability sampling. Probability sampling is about selecting random samples. The best methods to achieve the representative samples, there are 4 techniques: random sampling, systematic sampling, stratified random sampling, and cluster sampling. Simple random sampling. In simple random sample, every member of the population has an equal chance of being selected. Your sampling frame should include the whole population. Tools like random number generators or other techniques which base entirely on chance can be used to select sample. You want to select a random sample of 1,000 employees of company X. You assign a number to every employee in the company database from 1 to 1,000 and use a random number generator to select 100 numbers. Systematic sampling. Sample arranged in orders or intervals. Students will be selected roll number wise. That is, if there are 5,000 students in a class and the sample need is 500, then you simply divided 5,500, you get the 10. which shows every 10th student in the class will be selected according to the roll number. If your number is 7, then you will select roll number 7, 17, 27, 37 and onwards. This shows that there is a fixed gap in systematic sampling. Disadvantage: there is a chance of missing the most relevant person in between, but we can generalize it as it is a probability sampling. So, in probability sampling, you always have to take your steps according to a system. That is, if you select 7th roll number student in your study, then you have to select the 17, 27 and 37 if your criteria is every 10th student. Systematic sampling is similar to simple random sampling, but is usually slightly easier to conduct. Every member of the population is listed with a number, but instead of randomly generating the numbers, individuals are chosen at regular intervals. For example, all employees of the company are listed in alphabetical order. From the first 10 numbers, you randomly selected a starting point, number 6. From number 6 onwards, every 10th person on the list is selected, like 6th, 16th, 26, 36 and so on, and you end up with a sample of 100 people. Stratified sampling. In stratified sampling, different strata or groups or categories will be selected. The selection is not simple. It will be proportional or on the basis of the weightage. Due to the reason that in some strata population is different, that is higher or lower from other. Individual strata are homogeneous in nature. In post-stratification, strata are further divided into different stratum. Cluster sampling. This sampling method is appropriate when the population has mixed characteristics and you want to ensure that every characteristic is proportionally represented in the sample. You divide the population into the subgroups called strata based on the relevant characteristic, example, gender, age, range, income bracket and job roles. From the overall proportion of the population, you calculate how many people should be sampled from each subgroup. Then you use random or systematic sampling to select a sample from each subgroup. There are groups of different individuals or subjects, and all individuals or subjects are included in the sample. Subjects in the clusters are heterogeneous in nature, in contrast to stratified sampling where the subjects are homogeneous in nature. Different clusters in the sample are heterogeneous in nature. All subjects will be interviewed as they have different demographics and behaviors. Cluster sampling also involves dividing the population into subgroups, but each subgroup should have similar characters to the whole sample. Instead of sampling individuals from each subgroup, you randomly select entire subgroup. If it's practically possible, you might include every individual from each sample cluster. If the cluster themselves are large, you can also sample individuals from within each cluster using one of the techniques above. This method is good for dealing with large and dispersed population. But there is more risks of error in the sample, as there could be substantial differences between the clusters. It is difficult to guarantee that the sample clusters are really representative of the whole population. Non-probability sampling. In a non-probability sample, individuals are selected based on non-random criteria, and not every individual has a chance of being included in the study. This type of sample is easier and cheaper to assess, but you cannot use it to make valid statistical inferences about the whole population. Non-probability sampling techniques are often appropriate for exploratory and qualitative research. In this type of research, the aim is not to test a hypothesis about a broad population, but to develop an initial understanding of a small or under-researched population. Types of non-probability sampling. Quota sampling. In the quota sampling, you allocate quota for selection, like 5% student will be selected from each class without using any probability technique. Convenience sampling. A convenience sample simply includes the individuals who happen to be the most accessible to the researcher. There is no allocation of quota in it. This is an easy and inexpensive way to gather initial data, but there is no way to tell if the sample is representative of the population, so it cannot produce generalizable results. As you collect the sample according to your convenience, and there is no criteria involved in it. Voluntary response sampling. Similar to a convenience sample, a voluntary response sample is mainly based on age of axis. Instead of researchers choosing participants and directly contacting them, people volunteer themselves by responding to a public online survey. Voluntary response samples are always at least somewhat biased, as some people will inherently be more likely to volunteer than others. Purposive sample or judgmental sampling. This type of sampling involves the researcher using their judgment to select a sample that is the most useful to the purpose of research. It's a kind of pick and choose sampling. It is often used in qualitative research, where the researcher wants to gain detailed knowledge about a specific phenomena rather than make statistical inferences. An effective purposive sample must have clear criteria and rationale for inclusion. Suppose if your research encompasses issues faced by cancer patients, you will select cancer patients only. Snowball sampling. If the population is hard to assess, snowball sample can be used to recruit participants via other participants. The number of people you have access to snowballs as you get in contact with the more people. So, the number of your people you got access to will communicate and help you to reach to the other individuals with the same characters. Panel sampling. In this type of random sampling, some respondent is inquired in first and the second round of your research study with a gap of some period. It aims to measure the change or effect between two periods in respondent behavior. It could be probability or non-probability sampling. Event sampling. This study conducted on individuals participated in some event. It is to evaluate the impact of some event on respondents' behavior. Suppose if you want to know the impact on lives of the individuals in earthquake striking area, you will choose only those individuals. Thank you.